Howdy, everyone. So, another short clip here showing the assembly of the tail. Of course, with this being final assembly, you really need to pay attention to the details, right? So, you have to use the right kind of hardware, the right length, the correct washers, the correct nuts. Orientation is a big deal. You'll see here a little bit later on when I start fitting the rudder, just as an example, some of those bolts that hold the vertical stabilizer in place, they have to face forward. So the head of the bolt faces aft. And that's to give you more clearance for the rudder itself to be installed. So make sure you review the instruction manual and look at orientation for the bolts and the hardware. And of course, make sure you're using the correct lengths, the appropriate number of washers, and things of that nature. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward process. At this point, you've already had this put together at least once for the initial fit up and rigging. I don't know if anyone will recall that when I had done my rigging, I had written down on the blue pieces of tape the exact layout, if you will, for the bolts and the washers for the different hinge points. Some hinge points have spacers, and certain washers need to be up against the ball end fittings and things like that. Once I had done the initial fit, I had written all that down and I stuck the pieces of tape onto the individual control surfaces. So when I did this final assembly, I just had to reference that piece of tape for each individual part. And I knew exactly the bolt, the number of washers, fat washers, thin washers, the large diameter washers that needed to be up against the rod ends and things of that nature. Another thing to consider is when you have everything finally installed and bolted, you want to reference or you want to mark a reference line on the bolt heads and the nuts so that you can come back later when you're doing inspections and verify that the nut and or the bolt have not loosened up or turned. So another thing to keep in mind during the final assembly. So that is it. This is a very short clip. The tail is assembled, and I'll be moving on to the wings.